My father took me on a journey to the vast wilderness in Ontario, Canada, near the mountains. While we were exploring, we stumbled upon a giant cave. My father noticed blood trails leading into the cave, and he wanted to investigate. My father brought a rifle and I brought one too, so we thought we were safe enough. As we entered the cave, we followed the blood trails until they led us to a decapitated grizzly bear with its head severed from its body, and its head had been taken out of the cave, hence the blood trails. It was surely like a trophy for whoever did it or something else. We stepped a little further into the cave, and that's when we found something more disturbing. Something truly heart-wrenching. There was a man who looked like he had been mauled by a bear, his intestines spilling out of his stomach, and it was the most horrifying thing I'd ever seen. I think the old man reminded my father of his own father, because the man looked so much like him. And his father had been shot and killed a few years ago in a hunting accident, so it really touched his heart. My father began to cry and experienced total devastation. Initially, we were scared, especially me. The dead man's body looked like it had been sitting there for a few days because his face and body had started to decay and change color. We were completely puzzled and didn't know what to do. My father said we wouldn't call the police because we had tampered with evidence, and it was a murder scene, meaning we could become part of the investigation if there was one, and even calling the police would immediately make us suspected as potential suspects, even though we had nothing to hide specifically. However, ultimately, the decision was in my father's hands, so I just left it at that. We later found out about a week later, when it was broadcasted on the news, that the person who decapitated the bear did so because the bear had killed his friend, and the man seemed to try to save his friend by shooting the bear, but he was too late. It was said that the man decapitated the bear out of rage. What we didn't understand is why he didn't call the police after his friend was mauled to death. The whole story is truly horrifying nonetheless, and very strange and eerie to think about. It makes you wonder if there's something else to the story. Personally, I believe that the man killed his friend or that someone else might have killed him, and then the bear ate him after he was already dead. That's the only thing that makes sense to me. The man who killed the bear was completely unknown, and they had no information about him. It's all just speculation. This is just the story we heard. No one ever confessed to anything, and the police didn't even have any potential suspects. It's definitely a mystery in my opinion. My family and I went camping for a year in a small campsite in the middle of the forest. My parents let me bring one friend along. I was kind of excited to go, but I also kind of wanted to stay home over the weekend and play the video game I got for my birthday a few weeks earlier. The night before we left, my dad said I could bring a friend, but only one. That made me much happier to go, and I immediately called my best friend. It took a little convincing, but eventually he gave in and said he would come, as long as he had to check with his mom first. He called me about an hour later, after getting the green light from his mom that he could join us. Leo, my best friend, and I stayed up all night playing Halo and discussing what we would do when we went camping this weekend. I told him that the campsite wasn't like regular campsites in America, with parks and swimming pools with RVs and caravans everywhere. It was truly in the middle of nowhere. There were a few RVs, but most of the campers there camped in tents. Leo was worried it wouldn't be fun, but I reassured him about all the things we could do, and I said we could bring bikes to ride on the trails. Now we could fish in the nearest lake and lots of other things like sitting around the campfire and making s'mores. I mean, the list goes on and on. On our first night there, we did all of that. We even set up a badminton court, and the whole family played. The days flew by quickly, and we had a blast. Now it's Saturday night, and my family and I are getting ready for bed. Leo and I aren't tired, and we don't have any plans to go to sleep right away. We have our own tent, so that's cool because we have our own space away from the adults. I told Leo that we should explore the forest and try to find trails we've never walked before. He agreed to the adventure, so the two of us grabbed flashlights and waited until we were sure everyone else was asleep. We quietly slipped out of our tent and began to walk. We waited to turn on our flashlights, so we were at least about 10 feet or more away from the campsite because we were just careful not to wake anyone up. Leo had the idea that we should walk through the forest with our flashlights off for as long as possible. I didn't really want to do it, but I didn't want to look like a wimp in front of my friend, so I agreed. He walked maybe 3 or 4 minutes with almost no idea where we were going. It was so dark that Leo and I could hardly see each other. I said, "Do you hear that, Leo?" I whispered again very quietly. I turned on my flashlight, and so did Leo. "Do you hear that, right?" I asked. "Yes, what is that?" said Leo. "I'm not sure, it sounds like someone whispering though, and that freaked us out. After we turned our flashlights back on, the whispering stopped. We continued walking with our flashlights on for a minute or two, and we decided it was time to turn our flashlights off again. Less than a minute after we turned off our flashlights, while walking, we heard the whispering again. Although very quietly, like the sound of breaking branches and leaves under our feet almost completely covered the sound. We couldn't understand what was being said, but it sounded like a bunch of gibberish. We immediately turned our flashlights back on, and we were determined to find out where the sound was coming from. We looked around for a moment, and that's when Leo screamed my name. I looked in his direction, and he was frozen like a deer caught in the headlights of a car staring at something. I rushed towards him to see what he was talking about. There was an old woman who looked like she hadn't slept for several days, or bathed for a week, lying half naked on the ground. I looked at her in disbelief because I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Then she got up, apologized, and before she left she said that she was sorry again, that she was just looking for her campsite. Then she ran off in the opposite direction. Immediately after that, Leo and I ran back to our tent because we had enough for that night. We talked about what happened in our sleeping bags until we could finally fall asleep. The creepiest thing about this situation is that we were the only visitors nearby half a mile away, which is quite far. That was by far the weirdest thing that has ever happened to me. I woke up to an unexpected message from my boss one morning saying I didn't need to work that day. I was thrilled because it meant I could do whatever I wanted. The kids were at school and my wife was at work, so I had the whole day to myself. Plus, I still got my monthly salary, so I wasn't losing any money at all. It was paid time off. Let me explain it like that. I got up and went through my usual routine, showering and having breakfast. I took my time and did everything a bit slower than usual because I'm always rushing in the mornings, so it was really nice to take a break for once. I sat down and turned on the TV with a smile on my face, trying to figure out how I wanted to spend my day. Don't get me wrong, I enjoy staying at home like anyone else, but I also like going out. I get bored quickly, and I can only watch TV for so long. I decided I would go hiking on a nearby trail that I found from a quick search on Google. I thought about bringing Charlie, my dog, with me, but I decided against it because from what it looked like, it was going to be a fairly long and somewhat difficult hike, and I'm relatively new to hiking, so that's why I chose to go alone. I didn't want to tire Charlie out. About half an hour into the journey and on my way there, I texted my wife to let her know what I was doing. I brought everything I needed for the day, even though I didn't expect to be gone for more than 3 hours. I brought a little extra of everything just in case. I wouldn't say this is something out of character for me, but it's definitely not something I do often. I've been trying to persuade my wife to go hiking with me for the past few months, but we've been so busy that it's been difficult. I've always been someone who enjoys outdoor activities, so I was really excited when I arrived there. I parked my car and got out. I grabbed my backpack and headed straight out. I immediately noticed how few people were there, which I found unusual considering it was a Tuesday morning at 8:45 before I entered the trail. I saw a wooden post with a map on top of it surveying the entire area. I wasn't exactly sure how long this hike would take me, but I had a pretty good idea because I believe it's a fairly popular trail. The trail I took was a 4.5-mile climb. The whole view was absolutely beautiful. The day was gorgeous. There was a gentle breeze, and the sun was perfect, shining on me from behind, and that's exactly what I needed. I was enjoying my time in nature and truly appreciating it. About 20 minutes into my adventure, I put on my headphones, but after a few songs played, my music suddenly stopped. I pulled out my phone to turn the music back on, and I noticed that my phone only had 1 bar of service. Within seconds of that, as I was putting my phone back into my pocket, a deer jumped out right behind me and ran across the trail very quickly and ran through the forest and disappeared in seconds. It startled me so much that I actually jumped, and my heart was pounding. I chuckled quickly when I realized it was just a deer, and I breathed a sigh of relief, but then I looked to my right. That's when I saw someone sitting on the ground with their legs crossed, staring directly at me. They were wearing a creepy mask, and it seemed like they were holding something in their lap, maybe a weapon. From where I stood, it looked like an axe. "Hello," I said. "What are you doing?" The person then stood up, and immediately I thought it was a man because of his height, and he looked pretty muscular. He started walking towards me while swinging his axe. He didn't say a word. I started walking back the way I came, and even left my backpack on the ground. I was just trying to get out of there as fast as I could. The last thing on my mind was my backpack. He picked up his pace a bit and started talking towards me. That's when I started running as fast as I could, and he did too. I ran for 4 years in high school, so thankfully I was prepared to run. Then he threw the axe at me because he might have realized that I was much faster than him. He hit me directly in my left ankle, and it hurt so much and made me fall to the ground. I screamed in pain but managed to get up. Fortunately for me, I think it was the bottom or the shoulder of the axe that hit my ankle directly rather than the blade. Now he was closing in on me, but I managed to grab the axe before he could approach me. I ran as fast as I could with my injured ankle. He was a very tall man. I'm 6 feet 2 inches tall, and this guy was probably about 4 inches taller than me. I just prayed to God that I could find the strength within me to escape and make it home safely. My only chance of survival was to run or beat him to death with the axe, and that was the last thing I wanted to do. He could easily overpower me if it came to that. I kept running and chose not to look back. I just ran as fast as I could. I still had quite a distance to go back to my car, and I was determined to make it, although I wasn't too sure about my chances. I really gave my opponent a run for his money. I finally looked back after a few minutes of running, and I saw that he was no longer behind me. That didn't stop me from running, though. I threw the axe away because honestly, it just slowed me down, and I ran all the way back to my car while stopping briefly to catch my breath. Eventually, I made it back to my car, but I still didn't have any service. There was no one in sight who could help me. As I left the park, the masked man stood right next to one of the stop signs near the exit gate. He stood there staring at me. I felt his eyes piercing into me even though I tried not to pay attention. I called the police and filed a report. But the man is still out there somewhere lurking in the darkness looking for his next victim as they never managed to find him. I've never gone hiking since then.